All right, I also want to bring in our CBSN political contributor and Republican strategist, Leslie Sanchez, who's here with me in Los Angeles. One of the interesting things about this is Donald Trump hasn't seemed to want to hide from this. I mean, right after this happened, he brings Corey Lewandowski up on stage with him at a campaign event and puts him right next to him.
Right.
What is the strategy there?
You know, this is an issue where you have I think his reality TV experience actually behooves him in this case, where he's trying to win the optics war. He heads headstrong into the wind and is trying to create an opinion, at least among his supporters, in the court of public opinion. He's saying, I am strong, I believe this gentleman, and this is before, obviously, this came down. But in light of all of that, I think one thing that is very consistent is Donald Trump does not back away. He never admits culpability. He never admits fault. He never admits he's going to see something in a different way. He says he can negotiate and maybe is flexible on his positions. It's a little bit murky in there. But on issues that are very much direct personal attacks, he has never, ever stepped back. And I think that's another consistent issue to a fault, I think, is probably what we're going to see. We won't know yet until people start voting. Among his supporters, they'll love this. Among everybody else, including the centrist and the independents, it's extremely difficult for them to buy it.
And this is getting a lot of attention because it's not happening in a vacuum. This is happening against this backdrop of all this violence that has happened at some of the Trump rallies. Donald Trump says he does not condone it, he doesn't want it. But does this give his opponents more ammunition to say, look what this guy is creating?
There's two challenges here. One, it amplifies that narrative that the opposition has, and they're trying to create momentum around it. But I think it's a false sense that they can actually get traction. As much as we would have assumed that any of these issues would have brought down a normal candidate in a traditional political presidential, it doesn't have the same effect with Donald Trump because he's a larger-than-life cultural candidate versus a true political establishment one. So the only advantages that really, I would say, other contenders have is to win more on the substance of saying he's not prepared to be commander-in-chief. You're starting to hear that argument, but until you have a contrast, until you get it down to two candidates against each other, they're going to get lost. And the only other alternative is to have the media continue to pressure this idea and keep these scandals going. But it doesn't really help anybody on the Republican side.
And Major, do you see his opponents continuing to use this as an example?
Certainly, but the biggest charges I think that Ted Cruz and John Kasich are going to make about Donald Trump is substantively he's not prepared for the presidency, and there is just too much drama and combustibility around his campaign. But to Leslie's point, I think it's really important to understand how this case got to where it is today. Remember, Corey Lewandowski said, I never touched Michelle Fields. That is factually, provably now false. What he said in defense of himself was not true, pure and simple. And the campaign defended Corey Lewandowski then and stands with him now. So there is a consistent pattern there. Yes, I would agree with that. But what is inconsistent is Corey Lewandowski's appreciation of the fundamental truth of what happened. Did it in his mind constitute simple battery? Probably not. But the fact is his initial defense was, I never touched Michelle Fields. And then I think there's a broader conversation I'd like to invite Leslie in on here that I think women are going to have over this, because women now, and women for time immemorial, have been hectored by bullying men with a sentiment that if you speak truth to them, if you raise an issue with a powerful man, he will tell you you are hysterical, you are delusional, you are out of your mind. That is something that goes back to Greek mythology. And let me tell you, as a man who grew up under a successful mother who was an executive for AT&T and has surrounded himself his entire life with successful women, I know it is an issue and a topic that gnaws on them, if not hourly, if not daily, regularly. And as this conversation continues, I'm willing to bet, and I beg Leslie to jump in on this, how much that kind of conversation will circle around this story.
It already is. It's really interesting Major picks up on that point. If you looked at social media today, it is on fire. I mean, let's just give the feminist another reason to go after. Like, you know, when Hillary
Things
Clinton
have not been going swimmingly for Donald Trump
when you
with
can
women.
push white women to vote for Hillary Clinton, who did not have been running away in droves, especially millennial women, then you know something is happening. But it's kind of to a bigger point. It makes an issue. Yes, it is cringeworthy. And I say cringeworthy because women consistently in these kind of positions have been called the witch, the ditz, or they're a media darling, right? It's really hard to kind of have it both ways, especially the higher they get, and whether they're seeking public office or a C-suite office, a champion in corporate America. Carly Fiorina faced that numerous times. So you see that kind of thing. I think the other issue that's really concerning here is this is somebody who was foreseeably the victim, right? And she is delusional. So it almost hits another caveat of women who have stepped forward, who felt that something was out of line, and immediately you attack the victim or the alleged victim in this case. So that hits another area of subconscious that a lot of women, I think, are responding to. So it's not just, hey, it's strong women who are, hey, you need to have the chops to be able to be in the media corral and be on the presidential campaign. That's a fair point. I think a lot of people don't complain about it. They understand this is part of the process. But when you get to the point where somebody feels they need to stand up, then I think there's an aura of respect that needs to go all the way around, innocent until proven guilty, but no one is getting respect in this case. Neither Corey and certainly not the reporter. So it really puts mud on everybody's boots. It clouds the issue. But again, cringeworthy is about the only way you can explain it.
I want to thank Major Garrett because I know you got some work to do out there, but Leslie, I just want to ask you another question. A lot of people talk about Donald Trump being Teflon, that it doesn't matter how many things happen to him, he just keeps going. But he also has a fairly small segment of the population that actually says they're supporting him. How does this all work once we get to a general?
Right. The question is, can you take a really vibrant base of support and extend it and grow it, amplify it so that it becomes a real kind of movement for the general election? Donald Trump is going to have the most difficult case doing that because independents, and specifically women who move back and forth, they tend to be soft Republicans or soft Democrats, are having a hard time with his leadership style, exactly what people are looking for and what they embrace. So the women, for example, that embrace his leadership style, nothing he can do is really going to affect him. But everyone else is going to have a hard time seeing that he can really be commander-in-chief and has the temperament for day one.
We could talk about Donald Trump for hours, but I want to ask you about somebody who's no longer in the race, and that would be Marco Rubio.
Sure.
Apparently, he is contacting the states where he won delegates and saying, I want to keep those.
Right.
What's the strategy there?
Well, I'll just tell you, looking at how all this is coming around, I think there's continued frustration. While the establishment wing and the money raisers and the bundlers are getting behind Ted Cruz, the reason they get behind Ted Cruz, they're holding their nose and doing it, is because they believe he can be competitive to slow Donald Trump before they get to convention. And look at alternatives. That's really kind of the scuttlebutt, is that there will be an alternative candidate that can come out, whether it would be for a vice presidential nod, perhaps, or really just all the cards get thrown in the air, we see where they land. It's going to be a tenuous situation, and I think it's a politically astute move, but probably a naive one in his case.
All right, Leslie Sanchez and Major Garrett there in Milwaukee, want to thank you both.